Alex Francis, thanks so much for coming on to 27 Rouge.
Thank you for coming along.
I guess my first question, and I like to start out with this when I'm meeting people for the first time, is more one of identity. Who is Alex Francis? Personally, professionally, friends, family, whatever. Take the question in any direction you'd like, but who are you?
I'm Alex Francis. I'm the director of bars here for Little Red Door.
Okay.
I'm British. I've been in Paris for just over 4 years now. Came here from London, like a lot of people, started in hospitality over there. London, I think you can view it as it's a school for hospitality.
Yeah.
It's such a dynamic environment.
Yep.
It's a little bit like New York in that it's kind of tectonic. It's constantly moving. You don't really know what's happening around you so much. Like, you don't notice as much as when people who come and go from those cities like New York and London, you go back to London or New York and you're like, oh, I love this place in the corner. And I'm like, nah, man, that's been closed for 2 years. Like, there's a new place now. Whereas like places like Paris never changed. It's Paris, Rome, these places that have such a cultural identity and such a stylistic kind of selling point to them that they don't evolve as much. And so I've seen both of those now for nearly 10 years. And definitely you learn a lot and you have to adapt and grow a lot in London, but it's an incredibly demanding environment. So after 5 years of never really finding exactly what I was looking for, working in hospitality there, I moved over to Little Red Door in Paris about 4 years ago. I've only ever worked in this place when I've been in Paris.
Cool. It calls to mind a few things. I remember being, I don't know, I'm 25. I think I might have been 22 or 23. And I was walking around in the West Village and I really wanted to go to this bar that I had heard about like many years before. And I had always like wanted to go there, but then, we got pulled into something else and we never went. And I had gone away to university and I'd left New York for high school and for university. And I was back in New York one night and I was in the West Village. I was like, tonight's the night I'm going to go to this bar. And I went and I asked one of the random bouncers, outside of some wherever, hey, I'm a little lost. Like I see on Google Maps, the address is supposed to be here. Where's the bar? It's like a hidden entrance thing. And he started laughing and I didn't know if he was mocking me or what. But I was like, what's so funny? And he's like, son, that bar closed 6 years ago. I guess I was just out of the loop. Yeah. I didn't know. To me, in my imagination, I guess I forgot about it. It was still kind of there until you show up and you see that the place isn't there anymore. Right? It's worse when it's your favorite place, right? Yeah. Like a childhood favorite, you skip burger and fries, and now you see some corporate chain, whatever, Arby's.
But I think that also speaks to how difficult it is to actually survive in the hospitality industry. Yeah. Like the reason why that happens isn't because, it's not because all of these chefs and bartenders are like artists who go, no, that was a cool project, but I'm going to do something new now. It's because that business, it was really hard to make it work. And often that takes a lot of time and effort from individuals. And sometimes that time and effort doesn't even pay the rewards it needs to survive on its own back, right? Yeah.
I mean, in economics, we call the clustering effect. I'm no economist, but I watched a YouTube video on this the other day. And one thing I was confused about in Paris there's the pâtisserie everywhere. There's bakeries on every corner, right? And I was confused about how you would have multiple shops offering identical products, right? Pain au chocolat, croissant, whatever, all next to each other, and that they all kind of survived. And I see in Paris too a lot of cafes, and obviously some are better than others, some offer slightly different things. Cocktail bars are a different story, but why do you think it is that in Paris I know there's a sort of economic reason for this, but I think there's also a cultural thing in France of there's enough room for all of us, for all the cafes, for all the bakeries.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, it's like, no, you're not. You rent is fucking crazy in New York. You know, out in with the next guys.
So I studied developmental economics. That was my degree before I moved down to London. So France is, you're right to say it's culture, because France is an incredibly socialist country. It's a very high intervention economy. Just to talk about, patisseries, the price of a baguette and the price of a croissant is standardized.
Oh, really?
You can find places that charge more for them, but generally French people don't, because purchasing decisions are not as liberal in France as they are in, say, like the United States. But also because of that, what you find in France is that there's this, when you look at like the American version of like a free market model, there's the idea of like markets will decide this, markets will decide like this.
Yeah,
so, if you have a croissant, whoever has the best croissant at the best price will succeed.
That's what I paid. Right. I have paid $7 for a croissant.
Right. Like, exactly. But that's an illusion, right? Because you'll pay $7 and the value attributed to that compared to a $1 croissant, only you can decide whether it's worth $6 or not. And there are so many other factors to that, like convenience, and do you have enough money to just take that spot on that great street that makes it more utilitarian or more useful, right? But with Paris, what you find is that because so many of those things are protected, because also the price point is kept low, so a lot of these makes it more accessible, which means it stays a daily part of people's lives. French life doesn't follow trends in the same way that it does in the US and the UK and Australia. People just don't change their purchasing decisions year on year because, this is the cool new thing. We're going to do brunch and avocados are out, but quinoa's in. It's like, no, we buy baguettes, we buy croissants, we eat this, we do this, we go on holiday this time of year, we do that. All of this is quite
fixed.
It's quite fixed because culturally it is, but also because it's culturally that there's that idea of, if you say that to a North American or someone from the UK, if you say, it's fixed by the government, so it's going to be fixed by, so the French people have to, but it's also the other way around. French people push back against change, and they push back against decisions by the government that would change that, which allow them to keep those tradition. And there's obviously a payoff, and there's like a really good example is in the center of Paris right now, when you talk about, this clustering. You're right. There's so much densely populated and densely packed into, especially the first 6 arrondissements in Paris, so the very, very center. And the French, at the moment, the French around Paris are in a bit of a standoff where the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, wants to pedestrianize and wants to consolidate a lot of the management of those first 6 arrondissements or districts in the center. And there's many, many, many people here who live here. The street that Le Door is on right now, you've got people living on all of these streets. In Paris, people live everywhere. You have the first floor is for retail and hospitality, and then everything above is various size apartments with the richer, the more affluent living on the lower apartments. And
why?
Because it's designed like that. So if you look on these buildings, you'll see.
Because it's less hot in the summer?
To an extent, but also because it's just the size of them. So these are all Haussmann style buildings. So it means that the first 2 floors are larger in ceiling, have higher ceilings. The 2 above that have a slightly smaller, and the 2 above that have even smaller.
Quarters at the
exactly.
top.
And so because of that, you have people living here. Like Little Red Door, we've had neighbors our whole time. But the people above us who live here are elderly French people. So if you say to them, we're going to pedestrianize this area, as a business, I think, great. This is awesome. The whole area is going to get easier for tourists. It's going to get better for pedestrians.
Pedestrianize mean no cars?
No cars. You just take away the roads. You would still have car access for deliveries, but you would cover the whole thing over. Yeah. So that just like a lot of places have with COVID, you'd have more terraces, you'd have more people walking around, you'd have more things on the street, bands, music, etc. But if you're an elderly French person who's lived in the same building for 70 years, you're really against pedestrianization because you need car access to here because you don't have a lot of mobility. And so those are the kind of things where you have this standoff between innovation and evolution and tradition. And France is one of the few countries in the world that has such a strong sense of cultural tradition. It comes at a cost. Yes, you lose innovation. Yes, you lose some evolution. Yeah. And it's a huge difference between doing business here in Paris. It's a huge difference between doing business here in France. But it's also one of the reasons why the French have so much culture to sell. Like, I think if you look at somewhere like the UK and in France, the UK, we're so proud of how much culture we export. We're such a huge exporter of culture.
Cultural mercantilism.
Yeah, exactly, right? We're so efficient at that. Like, if you look at music, film, food, like we've created this post-colonial identity of, we have this identity that's second only to the US in terms of export, in terms of like how many markets we penetrate, how many people we know of. And that, the only people now who you can make comparisons to is like Korea are catching up quick, because Korea have realized that. But France is silently huge. It doesn't change what it exports. It doesn't constantly evolve it. But everyone has champagne. Everyone has cognac. Everyone looks at French food as these like benchmarks of quality and luxury. And because it's built on heritage. And it's the same for French cinema and opera and all of these things, which, that's why they quietly stay the center of luxury constantly.
I have a few friends who work in fashion, and it's been, fashion is an industry like anything else, but why has it stayed in Paris? Why do people continue eating basically the same food that they've been eating for
drinking the same bad coffee, drinking the same expensive, like the wine in cafes. Most people are like, oh, but we come here because everything's so good, and it's like, the wine in cafes is shit. The wine in these the coffee in the cafes is bad, but you're not really going for that, because it's tied to this idea of like, you sit there and you're in a moment, you're there to be with the other people or just watch the world go by, and you're buying that kind of lifestyle in the same way you do in loads of other places, but those things don't change.
It's interesting. This idea of cultural mercantilism is interesting, and the idea of innovation meeting evolution. I think of Italy and all the nice things in Italy, all the nice food, coupled with and the nice scenery and the joie de vivre and the dolce far niente, like the sweetness of doing nothing, and all the nice things. And then I think about the just crippling the crippling weight of trying to start a business or do something innovative in Italy. And I talked to my friends in Italy about how business works in Italy, how their jobs work. And it's very much, in a lot of cases, you get a job, you stay there for 30 years, don't ask any questions, you collect your paycheck, and then you're out. Like, I had one friend, I think it's kind of funny, and not just cast aspersions on Italy, lovely country. I was just there for a friend's wedding. But, he's a producer, a film producer, and he was... They like shot a film there for a month or something, and at the end he had to go pay tax to the local authority, whatever. And he says, "Here's a check for $25,000. Please accept it." And the guy's, it was like 2:00 on a Friday afternoon. The guy says, "Well, my manager's not here. I'll come back on Monday." He says, "No, I can't come back on Monday. I'm leaving tomorrow." He says, "Oh, let me go check the files." And he goes to the back and smokes a cigarette or something, comes, can't find it, come back later. And my friend is like pleading with this guy for an hour, just take the tax. I'm trying to remit my tax. But it was too much work for the guy on the front. Eventually he gave up and he left and he never heard from him again. But it's this question of it was too much work for the guy to just process the paperwork of taking this money. I think when innovation runs into evolution, it creates problems, but you also get a lot of beautiful effects. But that brings us to this bar where we're sitting right now, the Little Red Door. This is not a normal Parisian cocktail bar. This looks more like, I don't know, New York or maybe New Orleans or London a bit.
Yeah.
How have you guys penetrated the old French cafe, baguette eating? What's that bar? I heard you talk about it in Cravan. Cravan, old French bar, mirrors, nice wood stools. But here you guys are, velvet chairs, cool, innovative menu. Yeah. We could talk about that, but just on this subject, how have you inserted yourself into Paris? It seems like it's a bit of an anomaly for Paris.
Well, so Little Red Door is 10 years. So when...
So there's it's not turning over.
No, yeah. Well, and then I think that's the difference between like Paris and those places, it's harder to open somewhere like you're talking about with Italy. It's similar in France. It's harder to open something here. There's a lot more bureaucracy. There's a lot less availability of venues. It's harder. It's a bigger risk to take on staff, all those kind of things. But once you're up and running...
Why is it a bigger risk? Because you can't fire them?
Yeah, and also there's a cost of it. You know, the cost of a staff member is higher. You also need to have more staff members. So even if it wasn't for the fact that like staff members here are very well protected, they can't work additional hours like you can in London and New York. You can't have like a team of 5 covering everything and just having a small team running tight because everyone has to work 35 hours.
Really?
Yeah. So
I've heard the craze. I had some friends who worked at the Savoy, and they were telling me, in London, and they were telling me the rotating circus up till 5 a.m, whatever.
It's in London. When I first moved there, like you're working 70 hours a week minimum when you first get there. And sometimes when you say that to French people, a lot of the time they're like, and I actually, one of our old staff members, she moved from London to Paris and she was French. And one of the things that she would often say to the team was when you would say that, we work 70 hours a week, they're like, why? And you're like, because what else are you going to do? You go there to work.
Yeah.
When you move there, when you're like 21, 22, you go to London, you're like, I'm here to work.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like you go to work and why else would you do anything? Because you're learning and it's exciting and it's fun. And also you get paid more because that's a big reason why in France, again, when we're talking about, how this culture is affected by economic decisions and then shapes economic decisions. French people can't be paid for more work. Well, they can be, but no one will because it's very expensive and it's very complicated. So you won't be paid for work above your contract. So you don't want to, which creates a culture of people knowing how much they're meant to work and not wanting to work more, which means French people push back against anything that comes into conflict with their working week. And
or
so it pushes back. Exactly, like their retirement age, right? So
how many additional 35-hour increments is that?
100%. Yeah, I mean,
our
doorman Laurent, he's in a moment right now where his partner is just about to retire, but she's just had to have surgery. And so because she's had surgery, she is 6 months away from retiring. But because she had surgery, she has to go back to work for 6 months afterwards.
Or to get her pension
to get to that like benchmark of, I've done this much work, now I can retire. And he's having him and his partner having like a big discussion about like, how much is that 6 months worth? Because, that 6 months, like you said, is this many 35-hour weeks and it's this much effort, and would we just take this holiday instead? And, people are much more aware of it. Whereas like, I can't imagine in the UK or the US, like people having that conversation of like, oh, well, I'm just not going to do that last 6 months. What's the point?
No,
you just go back and do it because, it's just more work.
Yeah.
And like we're saying, it's just one last job. And
there's no such thing.
Yeah.
I think in New York, like everyone I went to school with works in one of 3 industries, and like investment banking, consulting, tech. And a few people went to law school, med school, whatever. But, because for us, that's a different grad school thing. But you go and you work, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks. And that's not questioned. That's just what you do. To learn, I think it's less fun in certain professions. But I think you're very much defined in the United States by what you do. Like when you're at a bar, sitting at a bar like this, we're 2 guys sitting in a bar, a very normal question, not rude, not prying, would just be, so like, what do you do? Even maybe
in North
before
America, it's the first question.
It's the first, yeah. Whereas in other places here, not so much. In Australia, I didn't know what a lot of my friends did for work because it wasn't important. It didn't define who they were.
In Australia and France, you have so much time outside of your job, you are more than your job.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Like in the US and in the UK, you are your job because it's all you do. For better and worse.
You wear it's uniform. You come to work after in your uniform.
Yeah. And so in Paris when we started, there weren't many cocktail bars. The most notable one was ECC, Experimental Cocktail Club. They have venues in all over now, but the most notable ones were Paris and then London. And they started that real trend over here in Europe of speakeasy style cocktail bars. It was very big, it was hugely popular. So the owners saw that. Both of them were working in hospitality at the time, and they said, okay, let's open our version of it. And it was around the same time Candelaria, which is just around the corner. It opened 6 months earlier. There were a few other places popping up. Moonshiner, just down by Bastille.
It's like the pizza restaurant
pizzeria with the speakeasy.
It's Argentine guy.
No, yeah, Argentine and Italian. There's like a lot of...
the bartender.
Joaquin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're Italian owned, and they had that very Italian style. Very classic bartending influences from the speakeasy prohibition style.
All of them maybe style. Yeah. All of them are Italian.
Yeah.
There's a few exceptions. I was friends with a lot of them. A lot of Italians.
I mean that's something that I think that Martin I saw with he was in London is something that probably made it very easy for him to move from London to Sydney. Was in London. I can count on one hand the amount of British people I work with in London, but I think every staff I ever had has had Italians in it. They're everywhere.
Did you work at the Savoy?
No. But yeah, everybody, like the Savoy everywhere has Italians. You have so many people there. And so when the guys opened here, they started off as like everybody's first business, kind of were a little bit of everything and not really anything for the first year. They were doing live music. They had small bar food. They had menus, menus.
What was it was a gallery, right? Like a road.
No, so the original concept, when they opened 10 years ago, one of the real identifiers for this area, especially 10 years ago, was it was where galleries were starting to open, where we had fashion brands starting to do pop-ups. It wasn't as developed in terms of boutiques and coffee shops as it is now. This is Marais. This Lower Marais has always had its very clear identity. This part where we're in now between Republique and where Marais really starts, it didn't have an identity as clear as 10 years ago, and it wasn't the nicest area. It wasn't anything, it wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't beautiful. And one of the real trends was there were more galleries opening. So when they first opened, they had rotating art shows around every time as well. And then bit by bit, a little bit into the beginning of the venue.
In the bar,
just
on the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And but they'd have like opening shows and stuff like that for them. Then they had a couple key members of the team come in, head bartender who really helped put himself and the bar on the map at that period. He was a really ambitious head bartender.
Who was that?
Remy Savage.
Okay.
And so he has in London a bar with shapes for a name. Just opened Bar Nouveau here in Paris.
Wait, sorry. What's the bar in London?
The bar is called A Bar with Shapes for a Name. It has the Bauhaus.
A bar with shapes for a name?
So most people call it Shapes.
Shapes.
Shapes
okay.
is like the sound of it, but it's inspired by Bauhaus. So one of the things that Remy bought here, which when he opened his own place, he went even further into, is he started doing conceptual menus. So there were ideas about, and it was a very established trend at that point, but I think Little Red Door became the place that did it the most immersively or the most intensely, which was you took an idea and you tried to manifest that in a drinks menu. So the first one was architecture. Evocative, actually. The first one was actually they did drinks. They made drinks based on... They made a drink, they sent it to an artist. The artist would make an artwork, and the artwork would be the only thing you had to engage with. So you had no words, you had no explanations, you just had the art. All of the art was different styles, which was meant to be in line with the drink. And that was how you would pick your drink.
Right.
The one after that was based on architecture, where you each of the team members basically studied a form of architecture, brutalism, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, and then tried to create that into a drink. And had a load of success, really helped put Little Red Door on the map. And then since
it was
then,
rotating every
year,
season.
every 9 months, every 12 months, the menu changed. And because of this success, Little Red Door became increasingly known for cocktails. Now,
what was it known for before?
Nothing. It just started. So after about 3 years, it was it's a cocktail spot. Like, because when they opened it, in France, you before cocktail bars, you didn't have places that had singular identities. like in the UK.
But there's no like beer on tap. There was never a tap here.
No, but you know,
in the UK, you go for it's extremely atomized, is what you're getting at.
No, now, yeah, but European culture of drinking was not like in America. You have bar, and a bar like you have this idea of like a bar would be able to do cocktails, would be able to do this, would be able to do that, be a jack of all trades, and then increasingly it became specialized, and it's this idea of like, well, as a business, you focus on one thing and you do that well. But in Europe, that was like the antithesis of these places.
Okay, we were talking about atomization.
Yeah.
In London versus Paris versus New York, and bars where you go to a bar and they can pour you cocktails or pour you a beer or whatever.
Yeah. So I think in the UK and the US, the UK used to be very much similar to France. Pubs had beer on tap and everything like that, but that's because that's what we drank. It's not like, pubs were places where you go to drink beer. A pub is the place you went to. Like every village has a pub or two, and that's just where you go. You would go to eat, you would go to drink. Historically, you would go to stay, you would go for entertainment.
House,
it was the public house. It's just where you went. It was just a place that was open to people to go to. Cafes and brasseries, the exact same. A cafe is just a place that does a bit of everything. And cocktail bars were this idea, and when Little Red Door opened, it was still had this notion that we still had to do food, we had to do this, we had to do this. And bit by bit, over that 3-year period, we realized, we can focus on this. And now it's very common, that people would just do this one thing. But that wasn't the case at all. And so we still...
How far back are we talking? That wasn't the case even like 10 years ago?
10 years ago, you still have... I mean, even to this day, you still have people who come into a cocktail bar and they still have expectations that you'll have draft beer, food, and wine.
Yeah. And
you'll have like a lot of that. And it's kind of like a standard that we more and more people pushing against. But when I say like France is culturally very slow to evolve. So even though, those ideas, when they go to America, they would understand it, or they see it in the UK, they just wouldn't expect it to be here. So with Little Red Door, as we realized that cocktails became a point of difference for us as a business, and also it became something that we saw a gap in the market more and more, is something that Little Red Door focused more on. So when I joined just over 4 years ago, I probably entered at the apex of when Little Red Door had focused itself so much as a business on just this, that we inconsistently stocked beer, we inconsistently stocked wine. Everything in the business was aimed at do nothing but make as many cocktails in one night.
Yeah.
And that's how we made our point of difference. But French people still, it's not a cultural thing. They have no cultural connection to cocktails, like I spoke about. They don't adopt trends and ideas from outside of France very quickly, unlike the UK. So, for example, the US, I think a lot of the reason why the cocktail boom was so strong was because it was also something that felt American. It was a lot of it came from Prohibition and all that, right? And in the UK, we took it on because we love drinking and it looked like fun.
Yeah.
And the British people love trends. So we'll just pick things up. But the French were like, the French saw it as an American thing, didn't really see the value of it. It's very hard to compete with wine, especially on a price point. Like the wine industry here is essentially subsidized by the government. And so to compete is very difficult as a cocktail bar.
Yeah.
It's also, I remember like when we first started doing them, we had like all of our menus. French people would just go like, why? They just didn't understand. They would come into a cocktail bar, and to them, a cocktail bar alone was a novel enough idea. So a conceptual menu, they were like, why did you do this? Why can't I just have whiskey?
Yeah.
It's not, the French drink a lot, especially spirits. It's not like they only drink wine, but just like the idea of mixed drinks didn't really exist. So we made our name off of both basically specializing, having this idea, those conceptual menus were very evocative of artistic intention.
Yeah.
And so
architecture,
art movements, language, universal values, like we had so many different ideas within those. And so many people come to France with an artistic interest. They come to Paris to look at all of the museums and go out into the countryside and see some of the places where you'd have Van Gogh, So we have a lot of tourism that comes through with that kind of disposition. And Little Red Door really did well on capturing a lot of people's imaginations in that way. But it was always a struggle with Parisians. And to be honest, over the 10 years we've been open, that's not necessarily got easier until we did farm to glass. Didn't get a lot easier. I remember during COVID, for example, hearing so many people like say, now you need to reach out to your local neighborhood. You need to like start engaging with the people around you. And I was like, who am I engaging with in this area? Like in Le Marais, the average age of most of the people who live around here.
Who said this in what context?
As it was like a global thing of everybody, I think, in the bar industry and hospitality, people said, engage with your local neighborhood. Because, in the US, like you had to start doing DoorDash to people who were like in your area, right? Like to survive, people were like, find that neighborhood. You can't just survive off of the city or of tourism anymore. So you had to engage with the people around you. Right. And people said that, and I sat there in Paris, and people would say like, oh, you need to reach out to people living in your area in Paris. I'm like, the average age of most Parisians living around here is probably over 60.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in cocktail bars. It's just not culturally relevant to older Parisians.
Canned cocktails
but the rest of this area is just Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Like it's an incredibly touristic area. Paris has a very small city center. It's very densely populated. And so most of the area around here is Airbnbs. So and it was something we always struggled with, do we need to be loved by Parisians to be a Parisian bar? Do we need to be embraced by the industry here? And it's something that we still have. We have internal conversations about what we can do and how we can do to be seen more favorably by the people, our peers and our colleagues around us. But it's something that was very difficult because Parisians didn't drink cocktails, because it's not something the French necessarily embraced. And when I say embrace, it's not that, they wouldn't do it, but they have a very different attitude to the way the people in the UK and the US and Australia have with cocktails. French people come to a cocktail bar generally as an experience. But when I say experience, obviously there's an element of experience in every cocktail bar, but they don't necessarily value it.
The French don't value the art, the craft.
They go to it like you would go to like a Benihana's. Like they think it's a show. They think it's something to watch. They think that the thing in front of them, if you present them a cocktail, if it's presented really minimally and the liquid inside the glass is incredibly flavorful and really well put together and beautifully executed, but it doesn't have some kind of overt, over the top garnish or style to it, they're like, well, yeah, but it's not as creative as like, oh, if they put this in a balloon and blah, blah, because that's what culturally, that's where most of the public in France are, because it's still finding its way to that point where it says, oh, this can be still seen in the same way as wine or food, because they have such a strong connection to wine and food, and because they never embraced it. And, like, again, when we're talking about the French are very careful to protect their traditions, their culture, they're very suspicious or very wary of external ideas, especially when they come from North America, because they want to protect what was seen as French. And so, it just made it a little bit harder for us to break through at that point. But it's one of those where, you exist in a place for long enough and you become part of that neighborhood and that identity, and Little Red Door, when it opened, I'm sure every Parisian around here would say that this was the least Parisian thing possible. Yeah. But Little Red Door is now probably the most recognizable Parisian bar. And what Little Red Door has done over...
What does that mean?
As in Paris, if you Google bar, if you look up cocktail bar, if you ask 100 people around the world a bar in Paris, Little Red Door is probably the most likely one for them to say or have known. If you speak to people...
Because it's famous.
Because we've been there for so long as well, like that. What I'm saying is, it's not just that fame. It's consistency. We've been here for 10 years, but
it's distinctly not Parisian, right?
No, I think not because we weren't Parisian. I don't think there was anything intrinsically un-Parisian about what we were doing. But I think because we've just been doing this in a space where there are only a handful of people doing it, and we've done it in a way that's consistently been seen. And so what we've done, if you look at what people think of, French bars or French bartending or styles, a lot of what Little Red Door has done over the last 10 years has been seen as that. And I think if you look at the people who have opened venues later on now, a lot of when people come to their venues, they come with an expectation based on things Little Red Door have previously done. And obviously the evolution of the industry here is then to move beyond that, and it is moving beyond that now. But yeah, I think it's that you're always in that position of, are we Parisian or are we not? And is that important? But we always struggle. And it's only farm to glass where French people have really started to understand why what we do has any kind of importance.
I think I want to get into the farm to glass stuff in a second, but first, I was listening to it was Michael Schur, who's the creator of The Office, who was on Pete Holmes. He has this podcast called like Weird Things. I forgot exactly what it. Let's make it weird, or let's get weird, something like that. Anyway, Michael Schur is on there talking about how it used to be the case in Hollywood that you would dream up something new, something different, and then breathe life into it, and then you would see how people reacted to it and if they liked it or not. But now, with social media algorithms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, whatever, you know what people like, and the trends are out there, right? And so what Michael Schur was talking about was that now, instead of creating something new and then seeing how people are going to react to it, particularly in Hollywood, films have devolved into just reproductions of what they know people are going to like. Like the CEO of Netflix came out and he said, I don't care if what we make is good. I care that people like it. And Michael Schur took issue with this. I also take issue with this, because it's like, do you create something because it's your like, your Van Gogh or your Monet or Manet or whatever? Do you create something because you're pouring your heart and soul into it, and this is a real artistic, brainchild that you've created? Or do you just look at what's trending and what's existing and what will sell tickets, what will sell chits, whatever, and then give the people what they want? I look at some of the most popular TV shows today or the Marvel movies, and I'm very unimpressed, because we know we're giving the people what they want, versus, I don't know, a Tarantino movie or something, just like way out there. Like, who would have come up with Django,
But then it's funny now, because you say that with Marvel, right? But then when Marvel first started doing those movies, they're very reductive of Hollywood. They pick a genre, they pick a character, they put together and go, oh, this is Black Widow and it's a spy drama. Done. Color by numbers film, right? And of course, so much of it is done in this way, which isn't the best filmmaking. But at the same time, when Marvel started doing that, this idea that you could take comic books and put them, so much of what comic book films before them had been is parts of the comic book universe, right? It had been like, we'll do Batman, but we'll remove all of this backstory and we'll remove the wider universe.
Yeah.
There's comic books.
That's why there's so many Batmans.
Because it was so complicated to tell that to an audience. And Kevin Feige went, okay, well, let's do all of it. Yeah. Let's create that universe. But because of its success and because of it, that algorithm is just keep spouting it out. So it takes even that, which is a really common touchstone, right, of this very form of mass media, is it was something innovative and creative, and it was a different direction for a genre, and then it's just been spun out and gone and been fatigued. I think that with that argument of is it possible to create meaningful things now because of how much the social media algorithms and the way in which people communicate has become so homogenized, and this value that I think it's very easy to fall into that idea of you can't innovate, or you get stuck into it. But actually, I think it pushes those people who want to have to be more creative and more dynamic to do that, right? Because even in Netflix, you're right, you can see that's the way they're going more and more. But they recently released the latest season of Black Mirror. The first episode is a commentary on, the first episode is basically a commentary on, if you take Netflix to its final conclusion, logically, what would that be? And how dystopian would that be? Yeah. And it's also there's a little bit of AI put into it. But
I heard about this.
It's so smartly done. And you can see that Charlie Booker being incredibly self-aware of what these algorithms are. And so even within that context, you still find these pieces of like artistic expression and cultural commentary, and you can still find them. I think it is a bit sad that has changed, but then, you know, it's also super easy to romanticize those periods where you go back and you say like, oh, but if we could go back to that point where everyone was trying to be Tarantino, like that was the period when you had those 90s rom-coms. So yeah, they didn't have algorithms to tell them what they did. So then just someone else was making bad decisions on their own back.
Yeah.
Like the corporations, which are always lazy and always have the most money, just keep spewing out rom-coms for 10 years because they didn't have an algorithm to tell them that no one liked them.
Right.
You know? And then before that, you had the huge studios, and the huge studios controlled everything. And yeah, maybe they had more artistic direction than the algorithms, but they were no less problematic in terms of like access to, for people from different communities and backgrounds and telling other stories. I think it's something like this always, especially in hospitality and especially in bars, you have this conversation about like who controls the revenue, who controls the investment, who decides what's good and what's bad and what gets made and what doesn't get made. Because we have a very close relationship with spirits brands, and they can dominate a lot of those conversations. And I think it's very easy sometimes to look at them and say like, oh, this is awful. No one can just do what they want to do. But the reality is like you're always trying to
makes the confines create more creativity.
Yeah, they're always and that's the nature of art, right? No matter if you draw a line around art and you say this is art, the first thing artists do is they try and do something outside of that space and challenge you. Right. You know, Marcel Duchamp was like the best example of that. Yeah. If you tell him what is art, he will show you something he intentionally doesn't want you to be comfortable to call art. Mm. And so we'll always find that. I think like the issue comes from when those algorithms become too dominant and they don't leave any space for creative output. But then the flip side of that is the technologies that make people like Netflix and Amazon so able to dominate are also the things that give individuals so much more personal power to create in those ways, you know?
But so what about for cocktail bars and being innovative? You see the menus up here behind the cameras. And, you know, creating a new menu every 9 months, having this conceptual approach is, I mean, that's unique. That is innovative by...
Sorry.
No, that's all good. Okay. Marvel, Tarantino, cocktails. All right. So innovation in the cocktail space, I think, I mean, I don't know, you're the expert. I would think people come to a place like this because it's different, because it's innovative, because it has an edge, and because it's not just, for lack of a better word, run-of-the-mill cafe, neighborhood place where you went with your parents and you go and that's the place to go. People come here because it's different. You described it in one of your previous interviews as this sort of Alice in Wonderland, escapism, conduit, down to like the architecture of the red door, the small door, like Narnia, stuff behind it. Talk to me a little bit about, I mean, you know, we were talking about the algorithm, we were talking about reproducing trends that we know people will already like versus creating something new.
Or taking a risk, right?
Or taking a risk. Yeah. So how does this feature into your current line of work and what you're doing here?
I mean, so for the previous menus, like the purely conceptual menus, the idea was always to just keep reinventing ourselves. And through that process of keep looking at different things, you find out more about how you see yourself and your brand and your product. And that was really interesting exercise for a business to do again and again. And myself and Rory, who was our ex-creative director, we would always view like the menus as kind of like the spring collection for a fashion brand or an album for an artist. Like it would be a piece of work that existed for a period of time that would define what we did within a certain period of time, but would always move on from it. And so the idea would be that you'd look at menu after menu and you'd see, you know, that thread between everything that would reflect, you know. Sorry, I'm just gonna, one sec, because the door's not actually been fully closed.
Marvel, Tarantino, cocktails, innovation, menus, albums, fashion, spring collection. Alex.
So we would do these new menus, right? We would do them every year. it would be this exercise where we push ourselves creatively to try and learn something new. That was the original intentions behind the conceptual menu, was just to try and learn a different field and then to go through that. And we kept doing this again and again. And I definitely feel like there was a real creative output from that allowed us to grow the brand, find out a lot about who we wanted to be, also how guests interacted with what we're putting out. We always view it as, we always try and push ourselves, but through, especially now working farm to glass, our ideas always outmatch our ability.
Yeah.
Always being like, oh, this would be super cool, and being like, yeah, we can't do that now. Okay, then we go, okay, well, how could we get there? I saw a thing, not necessarily someone I reference or definitely think has had a big effect, like someone we look up to in Little Red Door per se. But I saw an interview with Elon Musk about You
need to do the preface. You need to
do
the whole.
Exactly. Because I think he's such a polarizing character now, right? Yeah. But I think he said something about the idea is to have people living on Mars.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's the dream. He's like, but I can't do that now. Like, no one can do that now. It's a stupid idea. Like, no, if you told someone, you went to a VC and said, my goal is to make this much money to put someone on Mars, and you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But he's like, but you don't
give them acid or shrooms.
But if then
you feel like they're on Mars.
Well, but the thing is, right? He goes, but if you then break down, like, why can't you? Well, we don't have enough. We don't have battery storage to get all the equipment. We don't have this. We don't have this. You don't have this. Like, okay, well, let's create an industry around each of these things so that by the time you've created all of these different things, you're so much closer to that goal.
Yep.
Right. And so we always view it with Little Red Door of like, we're saying, well, we want to do this with a bar. We want to do this with a bar. Well, we can't. Right. And I said, well, why can't? Okay. So we recently, like this week, we are in the process of moving fully into a brand new lab space. The lab space is over 200 meters squared. Little Red Door, for reference, is about 70 meters squared. So it's 3 times the size of this space. It's on the edge of the what we call Paris, or the center. And it's a place that has pallet shelving, a cold room the size of Little Red Door, this, and this. All of these things, like, these are the next step in allowing to do more and more innovative things with the drinks that we do here. 3 years ago, when we started this process, we would not have been able to do them. And without being able to do them, it limited on what we did. So we found, and this was this process of like, how can we create something that we think is worthwhile, that's meaningful, that we can have that artistic expression within. I think that's a big part of like who Little Red Door is and what we do every day is we always look for that. Like I was saying, we looked at like albums and fashion brands and all of these like references because, they're products at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You can call them art or whatever, but they're a product you're selling, but they have artistic integrity and value. And for us, like, you can do the two. And so we were constantly trying to think, how can we do this in a more meaningful way? How can we do this in a way that, I'm a big advocate of the biggest influence you can have in your life is how you spend your money. You vote if you're lucky, 20 times in your life.
Sure. So the biggest influence you have is how you spend your money.
Yeah, in the world.
Because of the experiences it brings?
No, because of that's your influence. In the Western world, the biggest influence you have in your life is where your money goes every day. Okay. Think about all of the spending power you have as an individual.
Right.
Even like the minimum wage employee who never makes more than that their entire life. Their economic expenditure is still so much more influential than their political influence or their social influence. You have in the individual over time, very few people have more influence outside of just where they spend their money.
Okay.
And so as a business, it's the same. And so when we were looking at how we could do work as a Little Red Door with our next steps, our next menu, we thought, well, why don't we re-evaluate who do we spend our money with? Where does our revenue go to? Who are we supporting? Who is this for?
Right.
And through that, we continuously had this discussion where we re-evaluated the brands we work with and how we went putting together what goes into our drinks. Re-evaluated, who are the people we're engaging with when we're putting these menus together. And then that brought us to creating 3 years ago Grounded, which was our first farm to glass menu. And it didn't come from like an idea of we're going to be sustainable, we're going to be farm to table, we're going to be this, we're going to be this. It was like, how could we do these things differently? How could we do these things better? Because we were trying to realign the brand and what it had become after 7 years of existing with who we were. And what's interesting is I think one of the reasons that's been successful is that most consumers and most individuals do that now. You know, people talk about young people being more discerning about their work now, because it's not just about the pay. It's about how many days off I get and what is the ethos of the company and where does it place, because individuals are realigning their employer with their values. And consumers are as well, right? Consumers do it all the time. And so one thing we put very much forward is, you know, this is where we spend our money. One of my objectives with the grounded menu was to start being able to take control of saying, every euro you spend with us, I can show you down to the cent where that's going to. And one of the first steps we realized with that is we couldn't really work with those really big brands because we didn't have the visibility of where money went to that with them.
So you don't work with the big guys?
We don't have within Little Red Door, there is not a single contract that dictates what we serve within the bar. And we never
gin and tonic needs to be with Hendrix.
Exactly. No, we have no sponsorship for back bar, for what's in the well, what goes into the cocktails. There is not a single contract. And when we do promotional material, because that's one of the few ways we do work with larger brands, whenever we create events or pop-ups or those kind of things, it is clearly outlined from the beginning, there will be no agreement that is linked to what is poured within the bar. Because that's one of those things when we're talking about, you know, the people like Netflix, Diageo is an equivalent size business, if not bigger. The influence they have on people are not cognizant of how much influence a handful of companies have on what is poured in their cafe, brasserie, pub and bar. And when you define what's poured, you define the conversation around what people are engaging with. And so for us, we don't have that visibility. And that's also, you know, it's not necessarily a criticism of those bars. It's incredibly difficult to have transparency when you're a multi-billion multinational company. Like, it's just hard for you to be able to show people where your money, even if they did everything perfectly. It's hard to do that. So we work with business. And when we realized that, we started working with smaller, medium-sized local businesses a lot more. Once we did that, we started engaging with the community in a very different way. We started to build our brand in a different way. And as we did this bit by bit by bit, and I always think about the first menu as a little bit like, you have like a little like stray thread on your jumper.
Sure.
And you're like, I'll get rid of that. And you start pulling. And then all of a sudden the whole thing is come unspooled. That was very much like that for us. It was those initial conversations of how could we do what we do now, but in a way that has greater meaning behind it, or does it realigns itself with the personal values of the people behind it. We found that all of a sudden we were making much more substantial changes to the business as a whole. Whether it's now, you know, moving to a lab space 3 times the size of the bar itself, or whether it's, you know, just the people where our money goes to every day has completely shifted. The number on the nature of people we employ has completely changed. The people we interact with on a day-to-day basis and the people who interact with our business over 3 years has started to shift, because it's no longer just North Americans who have a list of 50 best bars and they tick them off every single year and they come through and they order the same drink in each one because of what we do.
Who
and
does
how
that? Like a critic?
Loads of people. No, not just consumers. There are I think that's one of the things that we have a very interesting relationship with things like 50 Best Bars, Spirited Awards at Tales of the Cocktail. Having been around for 10 years, and like we mentioned, you know, it's not that common that many bars not only exist for that long, but necessarily stay around that table of influential bars for so long. And we have a really interesting relationship because we're incredibly aware that they're a big part of helping us build that brand, because the visibility they bring is incredibly important for the business. But we're also very open about the fact that we don't define ourselves by that, and we're very internally, it's not something that motivates the decisions of our business in a way that I know there are a lot of other people who do, and you know, that's their business model. They do what they love. We were talking earlier about people who work a lot, but they're doing what they love, so they love it. All power to people who see that I can make a business off of using these institutions to make a really great bar, or something be seen as a great bar. It's not how we work. But one thing I always reiterate with things like the 50 Best Bars and Restaurants or Michelin or whatever is they're consumer brands. They're there to help consumer make decisions. the 50 best bars list is just meant to be a list of bars you should visit if you're in these cities. Michelin is just a list of telling you how much, like the original list was like 1, 2, and 3 was how far out of your way should you go to visit this. 1 was just, if you're in the area, go to it.
Right.
2 was, if you can go out of your way, you should. And 3 was, go to this country or this city to see this. Like that's how, and people for now they look at it and say, "Oh, 3 stars is this and this, and it means this." Is no, it's just telling you how much you should want to go to it. And so for us, when we talk about like Little Red Door and what we do, being noted in these places is good, but it should never be. No one should lose track of the fact that this should be for consumers. Should help consumers make those decisions. And so yeah, our business has drastically changed in that 3-year period when we moved from this conceptual part where it was much more focused on the artistic endeavor behind it. And now we're much more focused on how do we create a business that serves our values and our
the ethos.
And then the artistic side of it just comes through it by the nature of having artistic people in our business, because bartenders are almost always people who in one way or another have not succeeded in conventional institutions, whether it's education or culinary school or whatever. Bartenders are often people who have tried all of those and they haven't been able to engage, whether it's because of their creative skills, whether it's because of their personality, whether it's because of just their personal position, whether they've had difficult, or they've not had the opportunities to succeed in any of those by the things out of their control.
Yeah.
And bartenders often end up being those people who they end up in the bar and they have value. They're people who can be creative or can be amazing hosts or amazing showmen or whatever, this idea is of what a bartender can. You often find those skills in it, but they find it there because they've not been able to see in other places. And it's that last stop. And then they come from that. And I think it's one of these things where people always say, "Oh, but bars, people should value this industry, blah, blah." And to an extent, yes. But to value it, we also have to be really aware of why so many people over the last 200 years, when bartending as a career has existed, have ended up in that. Because they don't end up in it by choice. And then they say, why does no one value us? It's not like someone who becomes a ceramist. You don't fall into, well, I became a ceramist to pay the bills.
Right.
It's bartenders end up in that position and then they find it there. And I think that being aware of that and being able to navigate that is really important.
It's fascinating. I think of that. First of all, I just want to say, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass here, but I'm very impressed by the whole breadth of topics that we've discussed. Yeah. I mean, we went from economics to different, artistic and architectural movements to Marvel. This is a great interview. So,
thank you.
So to say that we're 3/4 of the way done here, that was, this is awesome. So it's really refreshing. Sometimes you talk to someone who's like an expert, like a professional, whatever, tango dancer, poker player, whatever. And we're going to talk about poker.
Mm.
But you get, it's like a nice surprise when you bringing in all this other stuff. But I mean, this goes back to what you're saying about, the idea of the bartender as a figure who's pulling together lots of things at the same time. You're putting on a show, right? Yeah. There's a social element to it. You're engaging with people. You have to be creative. You have to think on your feet. You run out of this. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
How are you going to make this?
There's the endurance side of it as well. Doing that again and again, late at night, long shifts, that being able to be, so many people can be a great host for, a dinner party.
Right.
Because you do it kind of once and it's in a really constrained environment you can control.
Yeah.
The challenges of being that amazing front of house staff member. With bartenders especially, as you balance the two. You're a front of house staff member. You have to be able to be on your feet all night in front of people, be a better version of yourself for the entire day, be a better person than most of the people you're serving all night. And then also you have the back of house constraints. So you work under time constraints of, you have ticket times. You have to be incredibly precise.
What's a ticket time?
So as in your ticket comes in so someone places an order. The ticket time is the ticket comes in the kitchen. It's not like you start your working day at 9 till 5 and you have an amount of work and you figure out how you're going to get it done. It's boom, it comes through. There's someone waiting at a table knife and fork in hand, like where is my thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to balance the two of the endurance of the service and the sprint of the ticket time, like all of these, and then the creative side of it of you then have to at some point sit down and create what you're going to produce, and you then have to figure out the marketing side of it and everything else. Like there's a lot more to it, which I think is one of the reasons why so many people who do end up in it find it such a rewarding but challenging industry. Is it demands a lot from you. It demands a lot of different skill sets to have a successful bar. But when you see them, it's one of the reasons why so many people can engage with them. It's because it's so much more than just the drink. There's so much goes into the room and the experience and the individuals that and makes it such an engaging prospect, I think.
Most of this is unscripted. Very little of this is scripted, but this just popped into my head. So maybe it's a silly question, but I ask silly questions frequently. I think about the dichotomy between, or the difference between a bartender and a chef. Chef is also an artist, in there, this consistency is important. You go to a restaurant, you order the duck, you want the same delicious duck every time, The consistency is paramount in a restaurant. But I think the difference is the hosting. You don't see the chef. I mean, unless you're in like a hibachi or whatever. Like the chef is the artist without a face, or they have a face behind the scenes. How does that, I don't know. I don't even know what the question is here.
Yeah.
How would you compare the two maybe?
The two, I mean, there's a couple of different things. So one, you're completely right. Like it's why I think one of the reasons, because being a chef is not necessarily as multidisciplinary as being a very excellent bartender, is why it's actually easier to create more incredibly talented chefs, because you're measuring them in less vectors, which means more people push that, which means the people who are very good at being chefs are very good. And I would say that when you meet chefs who are very excellent, they are immeasurably more inspiring than the best bartenders, because it's much more obvious what they do very, very well. And when you look at people who in the bar industry have become very, very successful, it's on the one hand, you could say, well, technically they don't have the breadth of skills as a chef, or technically, or they don't have necessarily the artistic execution of it, because it's a very different rate. But when you find people, I know that one of the most obvious names that pops to mind is a guy called Aggo Peroni. He was the head bartender, creative director, head of mixology for the Connaught Bar in London, which was probably one of the most notable in the last 10 years bars, alongside pieces like the Savoy. Aggo, when you see the drinks, he had a very clear artistic vision, incredibly wonderful ability to execute them, but is an incredible host and showman. And when you get hosted by him in person, it is this combination of not only does he know what he's doing, what is in terms of making the drinks, but he does it in a way that is in line with any other 3-star Michelin experience you could have. That's much harder to quantify and understand. Whereas with a chef, when it's like, this tastes good and it looks good, done. And now we're starting to see chefs where it's, this tastes good, it looks good, and it's executed with meaning. Because more and more asking chefs to be able to do that. And so I think that side of it is difficult. Also, I guess the other thing is, it's a lot easier. Chefs and culinaries, cooking in general, it takes a lot longer to master, because there's so many different things you need to master. The art of making drinks in and of itself is quicker to learn because you have less variables. We deal with essentially, if you were to compare it to cooking, we have one style of cooking here. You don't have grills, ovens, sous vide, this, and this.
Here being France?
As in the bar. Yeah. In a bar, like you have this one form, which is you basically cook with ice.
Yeah.
And so there are a few different techniques to it, but it's relatively straightforward. The thing that both share, and the one thing that's underestimated, and it's something that we work a lot with some of the best restaurants in the world, and it's something that even like the owners of Little Red Door, when we first started, I think their anticipation was the more we work with the best restaurants in the world, we would learn so much from these guys because they know so much about techniques. But bars, increasingly, the very top tier bars, use a lot of these techniques themselves. But all of this is done away from the guest. Is all the prep that makes those world's best restaurants, world's best bars, all happens behind doors, and it doesn't take place in the space of a service. It's just executed at the end. And you're able to elaborate that a little bit more in a kitchen because you can put more on a plate in many different ways than compared to a drink and a glass. So you're a little bit more limited in that way. But there are a lot more crossovers than people think. But I think that's mainly the reason why people's relationship to chefs is harder to quantify what makes a bartender or what a bartender is compared to a chef.
Well, a lot of things come to mind. But what if you had a guy who's just, or a girl, who's just a brilliant mixologist, right? But let's say they're deaf. And they, you know, and most of the people, it's not a deaf bar. Most of the people coming in don't speak sign language, you know. Or let's say they have no interest or capacity for interacting with people, whether they're deaf or not, you know, or blind or whatever. But they're like, you know, they're just a terrific mixologist. I guess that deviates from what you're saying. As a bartender, it's everything. It's not, the drinks is one of a few different pillars of the job. There's also the hosting, there's also the talking with people, there's the being, not necessarily bubbly, but being charming the whole time. I think chefs get a reputation as having chefs can be regarded as arrogant or unpersonable or whatever, as a trope or a stereotype. And like I mean, you know, that's just something that's sometimes attributed to chefs. But if you had a bartender who's an excellent mixologist, but they can't do the social element for whatever reason, to do physical impairment or they just or social anxiety, or they just don't want to.
Yeah.
Would they still be a good bar person, or no? Because that's not the nature of a bartender. Is this sort of Renaissance skill set?
I think that with an idea like that, it depends on the venue and the culture. Yeah, I think it depends completely on like the venue and the culture around that. Because for Little Red Door in service, all the people who work on the floor in the bar, they're all bartenders. Realized that it was not worth the effort, considering the company we weren't particularly interested in opening more and more venues. Yeah. And we're focusing more on like the Little Red Door brand and the creative projects that we do around that. And so we had opportunities for both of them to sell them. And we thought, you know, it's one of those where it's funny because especially Lulu White had struggled it had been open for 8 years. Yeah. And it struggled for 8 years. And now we got to the point where it was profitable. And then we sold it and had a lot of people reach out to us and say like, oh, I'm so sorry. I always wanted Lulu White to do well. It's such a shame. It's such a shame it wasn't doing well. I was like, it was doing its best now. It was actually on a good path. But it's only when you're on that good path, when you have the clarity to be able to look at something and go like, is this now worth it? Yeah. Because when something's not going well, all you can focus on is how do you fix it? How do you get yourself going to somewhere? So it was always it was a bit of a shame with both of them. But at the same time, I think for us as a business, about focusing back onto like what we're doing well and what we want to do more of. And like we're saying, you know, it's about, you can kill yourself working loads of hours, but if it's not what you're loving and what you want to do in the direction you want to go in, then it feels like a lot more work than it is.
Yeah. I want to finish your thought. Thank you. I was just curious. I guess I won't be visiting. Yeah. Are they open?
Lulu White is no longer. Bonamy is open until the end of next week.
Okay, wow. I'm on a tight schedule then. No, just last thought. I guess, you know, the bartender who's not engaging. It depends on the venue and the vibe and all those things.
Yeah, so it would completely depend on the venue and the culture that's in, right? Yeah. So I think someone like that, if you go to some bars in Japan, someone like that could succeed because there is such an emphasis on what's in the glass and the final product in Japan, because culturally there is such a big focus on excellence in a very single direction way, right? That you taste sushi, it is good or bad. It does not matter if that person is a wonderful host, the environment is the most welcoming, everything else. If the sushi is good, it will be sold out all the time in Japan in a way that doesn't exist in the Western world, right? And so somebody who doesn't have all of those skills, you could be a bartender in that environment. Also, you have some setups, which Little Red Door is moving increasingly more to, where we used to have a setup where everybody in Little Red Door, every single staff member who wasn't the manager or a director, was a bartender. And so you would regularly do many, many different roles. And there was a big benefit to that. The workload was shared. You were multidisciplinary. You were able to have overview of all the different parts of the business. So you understood how you related to them a lot better. But it meant that if you were very good at one thing and not very good at others, you would spend most of your time struggling and then part of your time thriving. In service, the people who work in service are all bartenders. They all regularly do bar and floor because there's a lot of overlap in the skill set. But what we found is increasingly we find people who understand certain parts of the businesses very, very well, but maybe it's not because they have any kind of disability that wouldn't allow them to, but maybe just personally they're not that great at a certain part of the service or prep, whatever. We've started to now specialize the roles a little bit more for the greater good of the business. So if we were to have someone like that, personally within our business, I could say they're a really brilliant bartender, and their value comes from they help us craft everything up until the point of service.
Right.
There are, for a lot of people though, in the bar industry, and this is something that Little Red Door specifically, we struggle reconciling our attitude towards what makes a good bar, a good bartender, with the rest of the industry, especially in North America, where people would say, it doesn't matter if you can make a really good drink at home or you can be the best at prep. If you can't stand behind the bar, make 200 drinks a night and do all of it with a smile on your face, you're not a bartender. There is an element, and there's elements of the parallels in places like that for musicians and chefs. Musicians, people would say, well, you can be the world's best musician, but if you can't stand on stage and perform in front of 60,000 people, you're not a rock star, And you can say that about chefs. It's like people would say, if you can't domineer like a whole kitchen, if you can't get 40 people to like follow your every word and everything, you're not a great chef. And that created that environment of people thinking that rock stars are these massive liabilities, because it just made itself a breeding ground for a certain kind of person. Same for chefs. I always had this notion when I first started working in pubs. Every pub I worked in the UK, the chef was smoked too much, drank too much, was generally just like not a great person. And I always ask, like, is it kitchens attract these kind of people, or do they become these kind of people because they make them, right? And so we are trying to move our model of like how we do our staffing and how we encourage people to try and prevent that, to try and stop homogenizing staff members into this idea of this what makes a good staff member. But the reality is most of the industry has an opinion on what is a good bartender, and they define it by being that multifaceted individual. And especially in North America, where bars and bartenders have much more meaning than just cocktails, it's a cultural part of how people engage in food and drink. I think that's probably one of the areas where you'll find that very homogenized viewpoint of what makes someone good and bad.
It's interesting. I did some of my research in uni on the rise of glam metal in the 80s. So I was particularly interested in Motley Crue, and perhaps to the chagrin of the history department, I wanted to do my research on this, and I did. So I traced the rise of glam metal as a genre filled with, showmanship and gender bending and really putting on a sort of experience for people, like almost like a circuit, like a spectacle. And I traced the rise of Motley Crue from Little Richard, who was artist in the 50s, to Alice Cooper, who was on stage doing all kinds of weird, chopping off heads and killing chickens and like just being like it was like it's sort of like vampire stuff. And all the act, it was a bit, that was all part of the show, right? Same with Motley Crue, like there was a lot of showmanship involved. Their lives outside of the stage there was no distinction. They were degenerates on stage, off stage. And so much of it was the spectacle. And when I've been in maybe Sammy or Dean and Nancy, or they've done different takeovers. I did one that they had taken over some. I don't even remember what the place was. It was on the water, and there was a hydroplane with Aperol spray painted onto it, and it would take people on plane tours. It was crazy, and they had this whole lottery system with ping pong ball. Like there was a dock, and people would walk from the bar onto a plane and be flown around, and then it was just crazy stuff. And the bubble gun, it's the signature. Maybe move the bubble gun. I was talking to Martin. I was talking to some of the bartenders, and they were telling me about the spectacle element of this, and that's I don't think that's all bars, but that's the brand. You come there for not just for the garnishes and the drinks, but like for the whole thing. The whole experience. It's a show. I don't know. You said there's this North American idea of going into a bar and expecting the bartender on his 198th drink poured of the night to continue smiling and chatting and being friendly. I think that's very much the vibe at maybe Sammy or Dean and Nancy or any of the maybe bars. I don't know. It's interesting, but they're not in North America. Maybe it's like an Anglo thing. I don't know.
It's definitely I mean, what they do so brilliantly is they are overtly focused on that. Like there is no pretense of. There's a lot of places where they'll try and they'll create an experience of a show, but they'll want to do it through elements of theatre in the service that seem to be necessary for the service. There'll be a lot of places that do that, whereas especially in maybe Sammy, it is a show. Like they routinely do little dances and songs, and they don't pretend that this is all for your entertainment. And a lot of the time, there are some elements. They have like the bubble gun, for example, or they have the smoke thing that adds to the drinks. Majority of the time, from what I saw, it didn't do anything for the drinks. But you're not really paying attention to the fact that they're not making drinks at that point. You're just watching. I think that's a different style of experience. And I think when I want to go back to like what we're talking about with 50 Best, that's when I struggle with understanding necessarily how valuable something can be for consumers. Because if you come to Little Red Door and maybe Sammy, and you go, both these bars were in 50 Best Bars 2022.
For totally different reasons.
Such a different experience. Yeah. And so you're measuring, and again, to go back to a bartender being multifaceted, because of the nature of a bar more than a restaurant culturally is not measured by just the quality of what's in the glass. You end up comparing apples and oranges.
Yep.
But I think if you put somewhere like maybe Sammy here in Paris, there would be enough of the tourist population it would be a smaller proportion comparative. So maybe Sammy, let's say, for argument's sake, I have no idea. Say 50-50. 50% is Australians, 50% are tourists.
Yeah.
In Paris, for sure, the percentage of Parisians who would go is smaller. But there's more than enough to have a successful business on that model here.
Right.
But it would just be received in a very different way. And I think that's the point. That's something we speak about a lot at Little Red Doors. We try to avoid using words like the best or sustainability or very like charged words, and we try and talk about we say we think what we do is important because of the nature of the work we're doing. We try and attach it to the meaning of our actions and how it relates to it. We try to reference as little as possible 50 best bars by defining, as especially when you've been in it for this year gone was our 9th year out of 10 being open, and 8 of those were in a row. We try not to attach too much importance to where we ranked in 50 best bars at any given moment to how valuable what we did is.
Yeah.
And we try to avoid from doing that because I think that it's supposed to internalize that. So if you attribute all of your value to how well other people value your work beyond just your consumers, it's very difficult to really find like personal fulfillment in that. But also we try to avoid that because it's not necessarily helpful for guests and for other people to understand what you do. And so I think in the case of maybe Sammy, what they're a really great example of is you don't need somebody to tell you maybe Sammy is important to have fun there.
Yeah.
In a way that I think that's one of the brilliant things about a bar compared to a restaurant is it's impossible to separate the star level or the 50 best ranking from restaurants experiences, because if you go to a 3-star Michelin, it can be a 5-hour experience. I love fine dining. I have to push myself to get through the whole 5 hours because I know it's important, because I know everything I've been brought has so much work and so much value added into it in the experience. But if you walked in for lunch into a 3-star by accident and no one told you it was a 3-star, and 4 hours later you're like, I've got to go to work, guys, like, come on. You need that ranking, that thing to tell you it's important. And bars, because of this multifaceted, multidisciplinary part of it, you don't have that so much. You don't need to know if maybe Sammy's number 1 or number 1,000 in the world. You walk in and you go, this is fun. This is cool. So I think it's a different yardstick you measure it by, both within the industry and within hospitality, bars and restaurants. But it's a completely different experience for different needs.
I think there's an element of magic insofar as that we enjoy being fooled. I mean, quite literally, we will sometimes pay people to fool us, to do a magic trick, right? To watch magic. When you walk into maybe Sammy or the Little Red Door or, wherever, or let's just use the example of maybe Sammy and Little Red Door. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? And maybe Sammy's is the bubble gun, it's the show, it's the tequila song, it's, Wen spinning around. Here, there's obviously the farm to table element, the farm to glass element. There's the craftsmanship. There's the history. There's a lot, right? There's the Little Red Door, right?
Yeah.
The escape, and as either a consumer, an individual, whatever, I don't think people necessarily want to dissect all the little things that make the experience the experience. They want to just sit there and enjoy this beautiful, if it's like consider it a watch with thousands of little pieces in it. You look at the watch, a Patek or whatever. You don't need to know every little gear, every little screw, every little trinket within. So no, this is a beautiful looking watch. This is a beautiful experience. I don't think people want to dissect. How much time did they prep? This. Where did this? Where did this come from? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends.
You want to not be fooled, but just.
But that's all
bask
bars
in it.
are.
Bask in it.
That's all, and all bars and restaurants and entertainment is, right? It's a little suspension of disbelief. You go into the cinema and you turn your brain off ever so slightly for an hour and a half, and you watch something and you immerse yourself in it.
Right.
And they turn the lights off and remove all of the stimulus to keep you focused on that. And the same in a bar is the same thing. A restaurant is the same thing. You go, you turn your brain off for an hour and you engage in the drinks and you engage in the social environment, and you do the same thing. When you go and see your friends, you take time out of your life, you remove all the errands you need to run and all the things you need to follow up on, and you take that time to just share with a friend and enjoy life. And bars and restaurants is that same thing. And you're right that most guests don't want to. There is a set, like in all industries, you have a set of highly engaged consumers who really do that. If you've ever seen the film The Menu with Ray Fiennes. Yeah, spoiler.
Sorry.
What I found really great watching that film about the industry was there were many different kind of consumers in that room. And what you find is that there's the sycophantic, obsessive guy who's, it's so in love with the industry that he knows everything. And, there's that running joke of he says he knows that piece of equipment and he has it back home.
Yeah.
There is that kind of consumer, especially in fine dining, but also in that top tier cocktail bar. You do have those guests like that. But they're a very small amount of it. And the majority of the guests, not only do they not want to, they don't have either the experience or capacity to necessarily notice those things, because what you'll notice if you work in a venue, whereas when you visit one, when you work in a venue, you notice so much more of the things that aren't quite right, because one, you know what they should look like. So if you're a first-time consumer, you walk in somewhere, you don't know what it should look like because you've never seen it before.
Right.
But two, you are overwhelmed with all of that other information. If you come into Little Red Door, you have the striped entrance with the big red door, and you come through and the inside is a very different environment. So all of a sudden you're processing more information. You have these huge portraits of the producers around the room. You have this hardback covered book that comes to present the menu. And then you have the dynamism of seeing all of these things going around and the red marble bar top, and you have the bartenders are elevated slightly above everything. And so there's so much to go on that you're not going to notice, oh, that thing is not quite straight, or that spacing isn't quite right, or the wash line on that drink. You can't notice those things. Your brain cannot process that much information.
Right.
And like you said, a lot of people, they go not to do that. And that's also, I think that's where, you know, the industry starts to eat itself in a little bit, like with music, you know, when music becomes too self-referential and too removed from the fact that people need to just enjoy listening to something, it becomes only for a very specific set of people. And it's the same for the bar industry. If you can't just give someone a drink, them try it, and them enjoy it, then it's ultimately failing at its kind of initial purpose, right? And there's a lot of places, especially now, where people try and navigate being more than just a bar, but also just a bar. You lose that ability to just have to give people more information than they want. And the reaction you get from guests is you'll have, specifically North American guests will come in, sit at the bar, they'll just go, I just want to order my drink. I don't want to engage with the rest of everything else. A bar is a bar. I want to sit here, order my drink, and talk to a stranger. Yeah. You know? And that's where the industry, I think, especially within bars right now, and I think restaurants have gone through that and are coming out of the other side of it, where it's in that stage of, you know, rejecting that. You know, there's a lot of places rejecting this notion of fine dining.
How do you handle that situation?
Here, I think it goes back to that hospitality side of it. So here we're very clear. If a guest comes in and they order a margarita and they call out the brand they always have in California, right? And they go like, I want Don Julio, or I want Casamigo, right? We really politely say, here, we don't have facades, we don't have those brands. But also, the way we make our margarita, we're a farm-to-glass cocktail bar, blah, 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 here's what we do. Our margarita uses this. So we import all of our agave spirits in bulk, directly from Palenques, with a brand called Singasano, who go and spend half the year in Mexico working with these producers to make sure they get a fair price, a fair blah, 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 blah. Because of that, we can't call it tequila or mezcal. And because of that as well, that stuff is really high quality, but it is not designed for margaritas. Yeah. So it wouldn't taste right. So the margaritas we make, we use a blend of that, and we use a French beetroot skin distillate. The reason we do that is it has very similar qualities to a very generic tequila, kind of earthy, a little bit fruity, but not quite. It works really well as like balancing out a margarita. But if I give you that, no context, you would be like, oh, this isn't quite normal. So if you've already called out something quite generic and said you want that, and I give you that, I know you're not going to enjoy that experience. But what we try to do is, instead of me denying you the experience you want, we try to offer an alternative. So we say two things. We say, here's how we do this. If what you're actually just looking for is your brand of tequila in your margarita, round the corner is Candelaria.
Yeah.
It's historically one of the world's best bars, has an amazing agave selection. I'm pretty sure they carry comparable agave spirits. They can make you that right now, and you're going to love it. And if you want, we'll walk you around there and we'll introduce you to the guys, and you can grab a seat there. If you want to try ours, and we say, if you want to try ours, here it is. And what you then do is, instead of denying someone the experience they wanted, you're offering them an alternative one. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, oh, you know what, I'll give it a go. But already they're on your side because they know they're going to try something different. Right. And even if it's not necessarily for them, they're going to be a lot more open to it. Yeah. Rather than just going, no, I can't do that. Or just giving it to them and saying, well, this is our margarita. Like, if you don't like it, we don't care. Because the industry, especially in hospitality, the difficulty is on the one hand, you're service orientated. So you want to give people a really good experience. You want to be very accommodating. But the thing, especially restaurants are getting a lot better at now, a lot more aware. I've recently just made a reservation for a place in New Orleans for a couple of weeks time. They have a whole page basically outlining like, this is what we do and why we do it.
We kindly decline substitution.
Yeah, exactly. We don't do substitution, but also we're open 4 days a week. You cannot contact us on those 3 days we're not open because this is our time and our staff time off, right? We don't have a phone number. You can't ring. If you make a booking, it is final. It is prepaid. The reason it is prepaid, they outline their business model and why they do it. They say, if you want to transfer it, great. If you want to rearrange and you give us more than a week, great. If not, we don't do it. And then they say very clearly, we don't discuss this in service in the restaurant. And it's about that respect of going like, look, I mean, tipping is a whole different thing, but if you engage with the business in any other industry, there are kind of norms that society exists by that the moment you get to the service industry, disappear. And so if you open a shop and you sell motorbikes, and someone comes in and goes, I really want a Ferrari. You're like, oh, we sell motorbikes. Say, no, I know, but I want to buy a Ferrari from you. So You're like, no, I've opened my business. I've set out very clearly what we do. You've come in and you've been putting your own understanding of what we should be on us. And so that idea of having the respect for a customer and having the service skills to be able to navigate that professionally is very important. But what's also really important is having the respect for what you do and how you do it, and being able to go, like I said, if someone comes and they just want to have a pint, we have groups of people who come because they've heard it's a really good bar, but they have no idea what they're coming for. Yeah. There's a place around the corner called the Cambridge, which is a very relaxed English pub-inspired modern brasserie, has amazing drinks, amazing food, and has a much better beer program than us, and is way better suited to accommodate larger parties. If we see a group of people get in the queue, our doorman, Laurent, will say, like, guys, just so you know, this is how this is how long the queue is going to be. It's a very tightly packed bar. If this isn't what you're looking for, we'll introduce you to the guys at the Cambridge because you're going to have a better night. And we also, whenever we do that, we say, look, this is what we do. If you're ever looking for that experience, we're here.
Yeah.
Because it's also better for our guests. I don't want a guest sat at the bar
who doesn't want to be there
because they're going to more likely ruin the experience of my bartender and of all the people around them.
Yeah. No, I think this is important. There's this idea of the customer is always right. We'll substitute anything you want. You can order off menu, this, that, the other thing. I think it's very American of the sort of indignated is not a word. What's the word I'm looking for? Indignatious? That's not a word. Indignation, there you go. Sorry, I'm forgetting my English. Not that there's that many other languages I even have floating around. I have little bits and pieces of a bunch of languages.
But that makes it even harder.
Yeah, no, exactly. I tried to learn Arabic and I kept devolving into French. And it was just, wires crossed. But the righteous indignation of, I'm in charge. I'm the customer. You give me what I want. It's a Vespa shop. We sell Vespas. You will find a Ferrari for me, or what do you mean you can't just attach 2 more wheels and slap a horse load? So I think I could absolutely see the girl from Santa Barbara, or the Chad from wherever, coming in and being like, I want my margarita, and the way you're like describing this is it resonates. I think it's important, and I think in any business, you want to do something well. Like I was having drinks with this Belgian guy the other day, and he said, in America, he said it in a thick French Belgian accent. He said, in America, you do it big. In Europe, we do it well. And I thought, that's right. You go to, there's diners in America where you go and they have everything. They have pancakes, hamburgers, pies.
Yeah, they do everything all day.
Yeah, everything all day, 24/7 diner. And that's just what you need sometimes. But being able to say, look, I'm sorry, we don't have cars here. This is a two-wheeled vehicle. This is a Vespa shop. Look, we're the Lorette door. We make these, specialty cocktails. If you want a margarita, I'll tell you, you can get a great margarita, but we're not going to make, we're not going to go, find Casamigos in the basement. I think that's important. Like, it also goes down to dedication of craft. It goes down to what we were discussing before about making art for the sake of art rather than art for the sake of what you know people will like. Like, you could just stock, you know, Heineken, right? For the odd guy who really wants a Heineken.
But and also you could do it for that consumer because you know there's more of them, but you also know Heineken are willing to pay you a lot more money to do that, and you can make a lot more money by charging a higher rate for the same product because we're Little Red Door and not your corner brasserie, right? Like, there are so many reasons that...
But you don't, in fact,
we don't. Yeah, there are so many motivators for that because of the way that both our industry and most of society operates, that you see why so many other places between us and McDonald's in terms of like offering choose that decision, right? Like
choose to have Heineken with a lemon garnish that is $15 or whatever.
Yeah. And I think one of the things as well that's really important is like to go right back to like the first conversation about like how that dynamic of whether the policy or the economic decisions around your business and around you affect the culture. It's a lot harder to take what we do and our attitude to how we respect what we do to America, because if you have a tipping culture, it's so much harder for an individual server to make that choice to say no because they want tips, because they need tips to survive.
That's the economic model. Yeah.
Also, the same for the working model, right? Like everybody here works 35-hour week. We get tips from people, from especially tourists who come from around the world, who culturally they always tip regardless of how much we tell them. The team here don't necessarily need tips to survive. Everyone here has a very high working wage. There's no concept of a living wage in France, for example, because the minimum wage is so high, because it's based off of the idea of what if this was a one income family of 2 children.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, really?
Like, the only place that doesn't really work is in Paris.
Yeah.
So we're able to do that because of the structure around us, because we have the confidence of a 10-year-old business that's very established, but also we don't have the pressures on individual staff members and on the bar as a day-to-day, that we can actually say to some consumers, we don't think you should engage with us in this way. And if you don't change those kind of wider factors and those influences around you, you can't have that attitude of make art for art's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are establishments in New York where they'll say, no, we can't. But New York isn't America. New York is New York.
And even then, like I spoke to someone recently who's based in New York, and they said, there was like quite a lot of prominent people in the New York industry who tried to create a movement of let's remove tipping. Let's say all of the services included in the bill. And they said, loads of those places went out of businesses and loads of them stopped doing it after COVID. Yeah. Like loads of them did, because it's
already so expensive. You can't charge $40 for a cocktail.
But then that's the thing, right? It's like, the reality is most of those places are like, if you go to a top level bar in New York right now, you're going to pay $20 to $25 menu price plus tax and service, and you get closer to it. So the reality is you are. And to go back to like
you would pay $40 anyway. But what I'm saying is, if that was on the paper menu.
But then again, that's the idea, right? So I think this goes into a wider conversation of why we try to work in the way we do in terms of farm to glass. Is you're completely right that if you put the ticket price is $25, but you pay $40, for whatever reason, humans, and to go back to like Netflix, people, for whatever reason, on average, are not able to process the fact that that's $40. They don't do that math. The same way that they don't know that what they've been advertised at them by Netflix isn't really what they want to watch, but it's been presented in a way that makes them more likely to engage with it. And then it's put together in a way that means they're less likely to click away from it. And then you're invested in it enough that you watch shows you don't care about, right?
Yeah.
So you're right, people aren't aware of that, right? You can't charge that much.
Yeah.
You can't write $40 on it, regardless of the reality being $40. Yeah. That also like extends to that idea of the diner, where you have everything available. What a consumer sees is we can do everything. What they don't see is the human cost of being open 24 hours.
Yeah.
And what does that actually mean for society? So in France, it's very hard to find places that are open 24 hours because the human cost. Because if you then had to say to somebody, if you're open 24 hours, it means a certain amount of your staff are working at nights. What does that mean for the work-life balance of those people? What does that mean for the cost of the business? In France, once you get to that point, they go, no, it's not worth it. We stop this. The notion of a free market where everyone will be able to do whatever they want as a business or an individual means they say, great, well, there are enough people who are willing to pay for it, but only at a certain price. The way the market, if you sold it, would work would be it would force prices to increase in the middle of the night because the human cost of it would increase. But it doesn't because they just charge people a very low wage. And so the consequence of having this environment of you can have whatever you want, whenever you want, people are not able to see that final ticket price that we pay as a society, whether environmentally or socially, for that. You know, this idea of I should have whatever I want, whenever I want, which means one way or another, produce has to get to you. So to have produce all year round means you have to develop growing practices that either mean you import so much of your groceries for 6 months of the year, or you grow them in really unnatural ways that have other costs.
Yeah.
And it's about I think one of the big movements, and when we're talking about, you know, people realigning their values, is consumers are getting more and more informed of the costs of the businesses they engage with.
Yep.
And they want those to be in line with their values if they were at every single moment able to see that final ticket price.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You're right. I don't know that some of this stuff is necessarily good for society. The atomization, the infinite options, the Amazon Prime. I don't know if they have that in France, like the 2-day delivery.
So in France is the only place that has Amazon Prime, where Amazon Prime does not have a specific amount of time that it gets you. So in the UK, for example, Amazon Prime is next day. It's just next day. But in France, it's quicker. But that version of quicker is next day, or it's just 1 week instead of 2.
Right.
Because French logistics doesn't work in that, you know, that Japanese or that North American model of like, we have to have something now.
I think, I mean, I don't know that it's good morally or like in terms of like the perspective of virtue. We have limited time in the SD card. I don't want to go too far into this, but that people can have whatever they want any time of the day, all the time. I think that is probably not good. I mean, I need to think through this position more. I think it's good that people have availability of feminine hygiene products, whatever, that's available to people. And if you're starving, you can get food, whatever. There's good to it, but also the fact that you can order whatever different type of Lego you want at any hour of the day, I think is not necessarily a good thing. But anyway, this is where we talk about, you know, virtue ethics and Aristotle at a later point. I have 2 final questions for you, my friend. Okay, one is on the question, and I face this myself, so I'm asking selfishly for my own edification and enrichment here, is this question of being a general versus being a gunslinger. Like when I was an editor at this magazine, before I was working here at Quillette. It was this art and science magazine. It was very popular in certain circles, and it was great. But as an editor, I managed the writers. The writers were all over the world. That was, you know, great. Editor is it's a managerial position. But I myself am a writer. I write books. I write all kinds of stuff. And as editor, I wasn't able to like do as much writing as I wanted because I was managing the writers. You know, I had gotten to that next level. I had gotten to that managerial position. But I was sort of like a general. I was no longer in the field of battle, going out, doing the reporting, you know. So right now you have a managerial position. You're a director of bars. So you're doing all kinds of stuff. There's the logistics, there's managing 100 different things. There's meetings, there's a lot of time spent behind a computer, emails, you know, things. There's a lot of elements of the job that are not standing behind the bar and mixing drinks, right? and I think for any time you're a bartender, there's prep and whatever. But what would you say about? I mean, more on a question of like gunslinger versus general, because I think a lot of people, they work really, really hard to go up in the ranks to get to a position where they're no longer doing what they love. Like for me, as being an editor, I didn't really like being an editor, editing everyone else's shit. And it was cool. I met a lot of people. It was exciting, but I had gotten to what a lot of people would consider to be the top. I had advanced to a position where I was then sort of above the writers, on the whatever hierarchy, I don't know, not hierarchy, but the operationally. And I was like, no, put me in, coach. Like I want to fucking play. I don't want to be the coach. No. What do you have to say in this?
But then, I think two things. One is like,
because you're now doing a lot of things that are not bartending.
I don't work in Little Red Doors Bar. Like at the only time, other than when we go through small periods of change where like I want to get behind the bar and be with the team in service to really understand how things are working or manage the execution of something specifically, that doesn't happen as much anymore. The one time when I do work behind a bar is more often when we travel and we do pop-ups and in those environments where I'm representing the bar and elsewhere. And obviously, if you frame it from that point of view of, general versus foot soldier, there's that element of virtue attached to that. It's like that idea, that Protestant idea of like doing the work is good. But I think...
But enjoyable too.
Yeah, enjoyable. But at the same time, I think it goes back to that idea of like craft and where you find your value. So if you're a carpenter and you work really hard as a carpenter and then you become the manager of the warehouse, for example, right? Of course, there is no overlap there of skill sets. You stop having to be the person who do it, and that means it's a completely different job. And one of the reasons why that would happen is, say, somebody in that business decided that you either have the managerial skills or you have the experience of doing that job enough that you would be able to learn how to manage. It's one of those misunderstandings, and you see it in writing, you see it in bartending, is managing and doing the job are not the same job at all. And more often than not, you see the people who fail who are great writers, but bad editors are the people who just don't have those skills. And it's really important that as a manager, the person who promoted you is able to identify those. And if you frame it in that way, then yeah, of course, there are loads of people who end up in positions where they hate it. And me personally, like, there are moments where I miss the camaraderie. The biggest thing I miss about working in the bar day to day is not making drinks. It's working with 5 to 6 people every day.
Yeah.
And going through a service together, and that service having a start and a finish. And there are certain people who really benefit from that and who really thrive off of that. But when you frame it through that point of view, but the way I look at it is, if you think about like an artist like Anish Kapoor, Anish Kapoor doesn't make his art. He comes up with the idea of the art. He comes up with the idea of what he's trying to do, and he has those connections with people who make those decisions to commission those pieces of art to make them happen. And so the value he adds to the world as an artist does not come from his ability to stand there and make the thing. And there's that whole argument around modern art of like, you learn how to do the classical stuff to do the modern stuff, right? You choose to do that. Yeah. And that's where I view my role now within the director is none of the, maybe think about it a different way. The person who makes the individual drink it would be really easy to say, well, they're the most important person to see that drink exist in the bar because they're the one who makes it. But I view the work myself and the senior team do is, yes, you do less of the doing, but you create the environment, the business, everything else that makes that possible. Whether it's doing all of the works years in advance before that drink even exists to make sure that the concept is there, that the connections with the producers is there, that the prep is done. And my skill set, I feel, is being able to manage everybody to make that happen. And I feel like that is more my role, is to help see those ideas come to fruition, not be the person who does them day to day individually.
Yeah. It's like the steering the ship, creative director, project manager, I don't know.
Yeah, like there's that, and that's also not to diminish individuals' roles in it. If you think of it from the point of like as a metaphor for a film, the director is the person who if you watch a film and you love it and you fall in love with the imagery and the style of it and everything together, that the credit goes to the director. But if you don't like the film but you love the artistic note, like the actual what you see on the screen, the director of photography as a person, you should actually appreciate, right? And it's that understanding of how the sausage is made is what makes you learn, engage more with it. But general consumers don't get that. And that's also like that idea of risk, you know? If a director does a film and the director of photography messes up and nobody in this audience knows, but they don't enjoy it because nothing looks right, they still take the heat. And the director of photography just goes and does another job, right? So it's that idea of like, you get the more responsibility means you have more risk and reward. And you do a lot of the work that isn't necessarily, you know, like you said, you know, doing an editor versus a writer isn't comparable. That's every industry, right? Every industry, the higher up you go, the less of the thing you do and the more of you just manage people.
That's the thing, though. I think people, in America, you're so oriented on just advancing that you don't ask yourself, what will this look like? What will my day actually look like? What will this entail? You know, it's just step.
And again, in Europe, you don't have that as much because if you don't define yourself entirely by your job, and if that's that feast and famine notion of like North American economics, which is the idea of if you do something well, you should get paid loads for it, which means that you define yourself by your job title and your salary.
Your worth.
Is what is attributed to that, rather than you have more people who stay lower down in companies because they don't want that additional work. There's a lot of people in France who are like, I don't want to become a manager because yes, I get paid a bit more, but it's this much extra work and this much extra responsibility. I'm fine where I am. And the difference of point of view across that Atlantic is in America, there's this idea of this is good. Like you should be motivated to do this. You should want to progress. And in France, there is less of that. And that means in America, people innovate and there's a lot of dynamism. But there's also a lot of loss and there's a lot of people who suffer because of it. And in France, you have less of that suffering, but less dynamism and less progress. And again, completely different ways of structuring society culturally and economically and has different outputs.
Okay, last two questions here, then I'll get out and let you return to your life. Managing complex operations, you know? Also, asking for myself. I have a media company. We're doing lots of shit. We do a podcast, magazine. I'm writing another book. We have social media stuff. There's a bunch of moving parts, you know. You also got a ton of moving parts, right? We have multiple venues, first of all. Yeah. And then within each venue, there's 100 things going on. What's some general advice on managing complex operations? Do one thing, you know, some people say do a little bit of everything each day. I tried that. Doesn't work for me because I was spreading myself too thin, working crazy hours. It's like focus on one thing at a time, make it good, get the plane off the ground, then move to the next plane, get that plane off the ground. That's what's worked for me. But what advice would you have to impart on the subject of managing complex operations? I
think like that idea of like, you know, where freelancers, they split their time between current projects and future projects, you know, having work and getting work. I think that's a really good way of like managing your own time as like a broad stroke of you should spend half of your time managing what you're doing now and half of your time planning to manage it, especially in that kind of higher director role. It's really important, like we were just talking about with, you know, that division of doing the job, being the person doing the job day to day and being the person helping create the environment for that to exist. You have to do that more. You know, if you're an individual at the top of a company, you have to start setting that roadmap so when everybody else gets there, the ground is already ready for them to do their best job. And then another thing, like we learn a lot, and it's a real habit that especially people in the hospitality industry get in, is this idea of like being professional means to have meetings. So let's have loads of meetings about everything. And actually in an industry like hospitality, there's preparation and planning, but so much of the job is doing. And it's the same for media. You know, you can plan everything, but sometimes the most important thing is get out there and do it. And so one thing I've learned a lot over like the last year, especially as we've grown to a point where it was very difficult to be involved in anything individually, was that I try to massively reduce the amount of meetings we have, but increase the amount of one-to-ones I have with people. And one of the reasons for that is what you find is, and you spend most of your time having meetings, one of the consequences is that that's when you encounter most of the information. And if you think about how you're going to manage loads of different projects and lots of different people, the least ideal time to process information as someone helping lead a company is in front of other people, because it's a lot harder to manicure your reaction and your response and how you deal with it. And it's much harder for other people to regulate their response in front of other people. And so what I found was to have these one-to-ones, but actually what they're really is you taking all of that interpersonal reaction and making it a one-on-one environment where you can have a much more direct and honest conversation about like what we're doing, where we're going, how have things gone, and then have those meetings that you do need regularly, but reduce the amount of information that's shared in them, and trying to move that away from we're going to talk through an idea as a team to I'm going to talk through an idea with one, maybe two people, but then we're going to discuss what we're doing as a team. And it was something that like I learned a lot through like having many meetings, is especially when you're in that role, and especially if you're growing quickly, a lot of people look to you, and those meetings can then very quickly become you basically dictating a load of actions. Okay, we're going to move to the next spot. So we're going to you guys need to do this. And I'm like, yeah. And they go away and they come and then we go, you didn't do that. Okay, we're going to do this. Okay, we're going to do, and rather than what a meeting should be, is everyone reporting in on what they're doing and sharing information and going, this is where we're going, this, and this is the update on this. And, oh, by the way, we were talking about this. Can you articulate this more? That's the benefit of a meeting. And trying to just, if you, at that point, at that like top level, if you can organize your time in that way, where you can really clearly say, this time is dedicated to this, and this time is dedicated to this, and this is the output from that. It helps everybody else do their day to day a lot more and that helps them focus more on the next thing and the next thing. When you look beyond that, right? You look for what's the thing beyond the thing we don't know? How do you start to like form that initial idea that we can then put out into the team and it will change, and then eventually have that final thing at the end of the process?
But you're managing multiple teams at multiple venues. Yeah. So how do you know how much of your limited battery attention time, 24 hours.
And so that's why it's really
allocate
important
to one bar versus another, or one project versus another.
So that's why it's really important to like set you like almost like instant delegation. Like the moment a project becomes real, the moment something gets to the point where, okay, we need to do something on it, delegating it away and being like, okay, so now this is something that's going to require like a certain amount of work or a day-to-day just maintenance of, delegating away to someone and then setting up that regular checking in with them.
Right.
So for example, our senior team here, every single senior staff member, I have a one-to-one, 1 hour every week. Once you add that into your calendar, it adds up to a lot. But what it means is I know outside of that, everything is always getting done because I have that regular contact to make sure this is going the way it should be. This is. And it means things don't get forgotten. And then because you can't also, and if you try to, you say, okay, now I'm going to focus on this and next week off it doesn't work. You're not able to control any of those projects enough that things won't come up. So what you try and do is just make sure everything's going and then respond to the thing that's flashing at you the most.
Right.
Because if everything else is delegated away and you're not contingent on something being done, if something goes wrong in the other projects, that's when you can bring your expertise and your experience to that to fix that problem. So then you enter in and you go, okay, this project's hit a problem. I'm going to step in and I'm going to be able to solve this as the person at the top who makes the decisions. And everything else will just keep working away. And it sounds bad, but like the reality is everyone always manages their workload anyway like that. Everybody in life responds to the thing that's flashing at them most. It's just people attribute different value to different things. So they think something's more important than not, right? So just making that also really open. And letting the people you work with know, like, I have these regular check-ins. You're valued. I'm going to work on this project. You're doing it because it's something we want to see happen. Here's how the prospects of it. But in the meantime, all of the team here know that if they need me, they can reach out, but only to reach out if they need me. Because if not, I'm probably dealing with someone else who's having a crisis or who's going through a bit of an issue, you know?
It's like you're slowly removing yourself from the work by delegating, and then you kind of have your hands on the controls, moving like a little bit, but you've delegated out, you trust your team, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then when they have questions, they come to you. When something's flashing, you can go there, but it's like, come up, like,
And then sometimes you go back in as well, in those rare moments when you don't have something flashing at you for your attention, you insert yourself back into it, but you do that in the time you have in a way that's helpful for you. And the reality is, you know, if you write out a plan and you go, well, in an ideal world, I won't have anything to do. We don't live in an ideal world. You're never gonna have more than 1 week where no part of any of the businesses and projects is going perfectly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to build that redundancy in, and it's better to build the redundancy in at a higher level than a lower level. Yeah. It's better to have a CEO or a director with free time to be able to help do future projects or manage one than an excess of staff members who can't.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. This is wise stuff. Oh, this is good. Okay, last question. What are some bar recommendations you have for any listeners who might visit Paris or who are already in Paris?
I think we've recently, like I said before, Paris doesn't change a lot.
Obviously, the Little Red Door.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's start with where we are right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would always recommend to come to Little Red Door. I'd always recommend to make a reservation. It's like our number one difficulty with feedback is people when they don't make reservations. We've bought reservations in this year because dealing with the negative
You make
response.
reservations for bar seats?
Yeah, well, so we do a tasting menu at the beginning of the day, which is like 4 drinks. They're not full-size portions, so you don't drink too much. It's in an hour and a half, and you get a couple snacks with that as well, which is not pairing, but they come alongside. They're coherent to the offering. Or you can make a reservation for a seat in the evening, and that's prepaid as well, but it's around, you basically get 3 drinks. It's essentially the same price as 3 drinks in the bar, but it's just the only way we can guarantee that you'll have a space. Yeah. Oh, and especially bar seat, if you want it, you can say.
The Americans
favorite. Love to, and French people hate it, so we always say specify. But if you come as a walk-in, some people, like on a Friday and Saturday, especially in the winter, they can wait up to like 2 hours. And we always have this internal conversation.
Do they queue?
Yeah. And
even French people queue? Or no, it's the tourists?
Not as much, but mainly tourists. But then they get in and they say, yeah, it was a really great experience, but I just don't know if it's worth 2 hours. Like, I can't control that 2 hours. And they say it as though almost like we intentionally want people to, or like we think of it as part of our experience is waiting.
The velvet rope.
Exactly. And it's such a difficulty. So we always say, if you're going to come to the Red Door, make a reservation. You'll be so much more satisfied with the experience if you're able to make the reservation than not.
Noted.
But outside of that, like, look, Paris doesn't change a lot. So we're very fortunate. We're just in a moment now where 3 or 4 places have started to open up, which are new, bring a little bit of energy into the bar. I mean, if you're in Little Red Door, the places around you that are really worth checking out is Candelaria, the Cambridge, Mary Celeste is around the corner, a really amazing restaurant with great drinks. Just down the road, we've had Bar Nouveau open. So that's a bar by quite a few people who have actually worked in Little Red Door before. So the one of the big names on the project is Remy Savage, who had the bar called Shapes in London. All of his venues are inspired by artistic movements. This one is called Bar Nouveau. It's inspired by the Art Nouveau movement. Also has Sarah and Hadrian, who are twins who both worked in Little Red Door, as well as some of London's best bars. And then Mark, who has loads of experience in London in places like Swift, and then also come back to Paris and has worked with us and a variety of other people. And that's one of the best places in this area, but also one of the best new openings in Paris in a long time. There's the Honeymoon over near Bastille is a tap cocktail bar. They opened a couple months ago. They have like over 30 taps.
What's it called?
It's called the Honeymoon.
Oh, cool.
It's right around the corner from Moonshiner. Like literally 1 corner around, it's less than a minute walk. They have over 30 taps. Everything is on draft. They have like a really strong...
Like beer, you mean?
Margaritas
on tap.
Yeah. Margaritas is like everything is on tap. They have over 30 drinks. They've got wines, beers, 30 cocktails, I think, on tap. Yeah, it's big.
How do you put an old fashioned on tap?
You use nitrogen at a very low pressure to just push through the liquid in the tap, and it doesn't really affect the drink too much.
But they're batching it.
Everything's batched into kegs, so everything's super consistent. Yeah, everything's super consistent.
Wow.
Everything's
and cold and all.
And ice cold, yeah, and it's quick.
Yeah,
super quick. So they're the founders, which is like Tessa, Ben, and Mike, are the owners, and they've got a really strong team of people who have a very strong presence here in Paris. They're very synonymous with the American bar industry, but with Americans in Paris, but they're very French. So they're all Anglos, they're all super hospitable. And the reason why they have everything on tap is just they spend less time making drinks and more time having fun with people.
Yeah.
That's a really great place. And then outside of that, you've got Classique up in Pigalle, really beautiful traditional French place. Syndicat, if you want to experience what like young French culture is like through the lens of a cocktail bar, Le Syndicat is modern French identity. It has French rap. It's very laid back. It's very cool. It's a
syndicate's a cartel, right?
Le Syndicat, Le Syndicat is like a union.
A union.
It's like a union. So your building has a syndicate, and it's like the group of people who represent the building.
Yeah.
So actually, the full name is like the Syndicate of Defense of French Spirits is the full name, but people just call it Syndicate. Yeah. That's an incredibly cool, relaxed bar. Yeah. Amazing vibe in the summer, especially. But yeah, I think as well, like all of those. If you come to any one of those in Paris, and you ask, like, where should I go? All of them, we basically have the same list of places we'd recommend, and they're all great. My favorite place in Paris is Croissants, which is such a beautiful, old, listed cafe in what I describe like Woody Allen Paris, which is like the west of Paris. Very aesthetic, big boulevards, amazingly manicured buildings. And it looks like every stereotype of a French cafe you've ever seen, but it just so happens to have like some of the best bar snacks in the city, the most beautifully executed classic style cocktails. For me, it would be the experience I would look for if I was a tourist coming for Paris. Like it's the thing I would expect and want.
Paris and
everything else I think is extra and is really interesting and really exciting, but that's like both if am I going for an experience of like cocktails and Paris, that's the place. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the list. Partially half for myself, half for the audience.
Yeah.
You know where I went the other day that I liked was Bluebird. And it's in the 11th. Yeah. It's right over the border.
It's not too far from like Moonshiner and the Honeymoon. And actually our operations manager, or he's a previous bar manager, Alessio, he is.
I met him.
Yeah.
The Italian guy.
Yeah. So Alessio is. He.
Bald.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very nice man.
Really lovely. So we hired him. Well, I spent 3 months convincing him to move here because we love Bluebird so much. It's like one of Paris's best neighborhood bars. It has a really wonderful feeling to it, and it's something that I think that you don't find as often in Paris. So when you find somewhere that really feels like it's for a neighborhood by a neighborhood, it's really important. Yeah.
Well, it's good. Well, Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show. This is a pleasure.
Thank you.